I actually grew up in a place called Hyderabad in southern India,
Hmm.
actually.
Oh, cool. Uh, what was that like?
It was great. I mean, I had a pretty idyllic childhood. Both my parents, my dad used to and still works in insurance, and my mother was a housewife, and I had another young sibling, and it was a great childhood, really. I mean, I reflect on it quite often in terms of when you talk about your business journey, in terms of the head start you've got in life. And I was talking recently about the privileges I've had in terms of, when you become an entrepreneur, it's very easy to have this caricature sketch of an entrepreneur, the kind of person that is super hardworking, super will, just gets on with it and creates success out of nothing. And I think there are a lot of people that do that. But I think for me, I think, I've had a pretty big leg up in life. Uh, Most importantly, from a great family, that
Oh, wow.
that that kind of gave me a really nurturing childhood.
How was Hyderabad? How is Hyderabad different to the UK or different from Newcastle?
I think different in the sense that certainly India is quite I mean, the population centers are very, very big. Hyderabad, the city was a very crowded city. Although when I was young, when I was growing up there, it wasn't probably as big a city as it is now, because in India, population growth is massive. I mean, if you think about, say in the last 10 years, Newcastle might have grown by, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 people. Hyderabad has grown by, something like 50, 60 million people,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's a very different base. But but in a lot of ways, I think, it is very similar. I mean, I remember obviously when I grew up there, that was home, and I've been in Newcastle now for something coming close to 20 years, and
Hmm.
this feels like home, and it's a very similar community, very welcoming, very entrepreneurial. In fact, Hyderabad is known as alongside Bangalore in India, as the Silicon Valley of India, really,
Hmm.
in terms of where the tech investment is. And yeah, so, we're similar, but also quite different.
Can I ask, what was your, when you were a child and you were in Hyderabad, what was your opinion of the UK, and did it almost live up to what you thought it would be like when you first moved across?
I had a real privilege when I was growing up, because my primary school that I went to was founded by an Englishman.
Okay.
He was a guy who'd effectively, he was an Englishman. He went to Southeast Asia, and he did a lot of education pieces, training, etc. And I went to a school where the houses were called London, Letchworth, Lincoln, etc. So it was effectively a British school. I had a lot of friends that were British, and in fact, no, I mean, to be honest, I mean, you talk about diversity and culture in the late 80s and early 90s. I went to a school where some of my best friends were Russian, English, Polish, like really
Hmm.
diverse, nationalities, cultures, etc. So particularly in terms of UK, because it was an English school, founded by an Englishman who I really admired. He was a great guy. He was great educated. Um, that was kind of my experience of England, I guess, in the UK before I came here. So I had a pretty good positive opinion of it. Although, my aspiration was never to come to the UK. I came to the UK as a student, and I can talk about that a little bit more. So it wasn't something that I thought about, but it just ended up happening like that.
No, cool. Because I've got friends who are Indian, but I met at university, and you're completely right that the tech scene in Bangalore or in different places is huge. That I've got
Mhm.
ambitions to go over there next year, and it's just what I love now. I hope is that the world feels a smaller place because you can discover different cultures relatively easier than you probably could 30 years ago. And again with the global war for talent, but likewise you can have so many really super talented people in India that are probably streets ahead of people you have in the UK and the US. And it's fascinating the way that if you go back 20 years ago, all the money was say in America or the Europe, But actually now the money goes where the talents are, and that the value is in the idea more so than the location, if that makes sense. Now I really kind of respect that. So at what point did you move? Because you went to Southampton, was it?
I did, yeah. I went to Southampton, and I had a pretty, I said, I had a pretty interesting journey to Southampton. So it's interesting to go back to that point about talent. One of the things, talking about privilege and growing up, education was a massively important thing in India, and even now it is.
Hmm.
Indian parents, they will sacrifice a lot for their children to get a great education. So this focus on education that my father put from day one was super important, because while I'm not a huge believer in degrees and in getting big PhDs,
Hmm.
etc., education in its most fundamental form, whether it was diversity, etc., was super important. And so I had this privilege of having a great education. I went to an Ivy, like I said, it was an English school, but it was an Ivy League school. It was a really, really good school. But actually, the consequence of that was there were very high expectations of me, because I used to be a brilliant student. Education was my passion. I mean, I was actually one of those weird kids that enjoyed doing their homework rather than I had to be forced to do that. And that actually kind of weaves into my story of coming to Southampton. So when I was very young, I had this real passion to be a doctor. What I wanted to be was to be a neurosurgeon, and I wanted to be a doctor. But but as the years had progressed, and in India, if you want to be a doctor, you've got to do a certain amount of prep. You prepare for your med school, you prepare for
Hmm.
your pre med, and because of that, you take a certain trajectory of subjects like your A and O levels. So you have to do more biology,
Yeah.
chemistry, etc. And I went down this path where, since I was like, I think 6 or 7, I wanted to be a doctor. Um, and I'd focused my life in terms of becoming that. And as became 14 and 15, and I got into, becoming a doctor, I think the focus was very much around, how am I going to become a doctor? What is my priority going to be? And, I guess, how do I become a neurosurgeon? But while I was doing that, when I was about 15, my dad actually bought me my first computer. And I'd never actually used computers in my life before. It was something that I was never interested in. Tech wasn't something I really felt passionate about.
Hmm.
Yeah, we had a Nintendo at home, and I used to mess about with it. But really, it wasn't really something. My passion was to be a neurosurgeon, a doctor. And when I got this computer at 15, I just got obsessed with it. I mean, I remember uh, this was just as I was doing my prep for my pre-medical,
Hmm.
school in a couple of years. And then, in 3 months, I taught myself C++. I taught myself programming. I used to stay up until 5 a.m., learning how to build games and all the things that 15-year-old kids do. And so I ended up in this weird situation where all my life I've been preparing, and I, pivoted my education and everything to become a doctor. But at the age of 17,
Hmm.
I then decided I don't want to become a doctor, that I really like computers. And what I really wanted to do was a computer science degree. The challenge I had was, growing up in India, and obviously, being, being part of this family that had very high educational standards. If I was to do computer science, then my dad said, "Well, you can only do it in, because originally for my doctorate, I was planning to go to Harvard Medical, which is kind of the, like the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the the typical Indian, thing of, if you got to go to Ivy League school, right, and stuff. So obviously, being a doctor wasn't important anymore. Then my dad said, "Well, okay, if you want to do computer science, the only thing you can do is get to MIT or Stanford, or one of those big schools." But the problem was MIT needed you to do your maths and your SATs, which basically you had to have maths capabilities to get into computer science, and I didn't have either of those things. So long story short, I wanted to do computer science, but I needed to get into a school or a university that didn't require maths and scholastic aptitude and maths. And so instead of being able to go to America, which
Hmm.
was my original ambition, which is growing up as an Indian kid, most of you go to like a American institute to study, or an American university to study. Um, I ended up, and I hate saying that, I ended up settling for the UK, because Southampton or Solent University at that time, it was called Southampton
Hmm.
Solent, Southampton Institute, didn't have a requirement. They didn't need you to have done a maths A levels or something similar to be able to get into computer science. They said, look, it doesn't matter what your background is, as long as you've got the right aptitude and a good kind of,
Hmm.
A level, we didn't have A levels in India, but it was very similar. It was called a plus two. You could get in. So I inadvertently landed in Southampton instead of MIT, really.
Honestly, it's fascinating. I think a lot of people have dreams and ambitions that when I was doing my A levels, because I'm a basketball player, part of me always wanted to go to America because of the same dream. Because I think part of the media and film and TV, they sell the American dream so well that
Yeah.
actually you think, wow, that'd be incredible. But then actually, as you travel a bit more, as you go through life, and I've been to America quite a few times, you can almost see past the facade. And I was in LA 4 months ago, and it's not as pretty as it makes out. And I think often, there will be brilliant places. So I love the UK, but I'm sure India is fantastic as well. But you can always be sold a dream that you think is the best. But actually, I guess fate will always direct you in the right way. But we're very happy to have you and anyone that wants to come to the UK as well, which is quite cool. So I was going to say, how did you then find the university experience itself? With one things that I certainly found is that the irony when I was at school, so I went to school in just a normal comprehensive school in Liverpool. Was there? No, I think there was no. The school must have been 99% white, but everyone was from the local area. There was no one from anywhere else. So it was only actually when I went to university I got to really meet and interact with people from Russia and Poland and India and stuff. But how did you find that transition when you came across?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the transition was easy for me because I went to a primary school where a lot of my friends were, they were Caucasian friends, they were African friends, etc. So, and I think I talk a lot about that defining moment when you're a young person and you're getting to experience all these cultures. And then, when you're a child, even simple things are complicated. Like I remember the first time I ever tried sausages, that was just incredible. My Russian friend, and bacon, and I was thinking I was like what 12 or something. But the point is, I got to experience these diverse cultures, diverse food cultures, diverse. I had a friend whose parents were divorced, and that was not something you ever experienced in India, right?
Okay.
That separation and stuff. So just the diverse thinking, the different way people thought, the different way they. So when I came to UK, I adapted pretty quickly because it felt a bit like home. Because,
That's good.
like I said, going up, a lot of my friends were Caucasian, etc. What I actually found quite interesting though was part of this journey in terms of going into computers was the other thing I wanted to do, other than being a computer engineer or software engineer, was I was really obsessed with being an entrepreneur by then too. I had all these ideas, and
That's
that's
cool.
that was the definition of the late '90s, right? In the tech world, people were creating the Amazons, etc.
Hmm.
I'm not claiming to be anywhere in the same league as them, but there was this time where the internet was new, everybody was creating something. And actually, I only went to university to pacify my dad because he was obviously upset that I wasn't going to be a neurosurgeon, and he clearly couldn't stomach it. I think being from India, like my entire generational family has always had jobs. They've never really ran a business, so running a business was anathema. So my dad said, "Look, go to university, get a job for a few years, and then if you're comfortable, you can see what you do." So I only really went to university to kind of appease my dad.
Hmm.
And what I really found was the university experience, the social experience was really, really good. But the educational experience was really, really dull for me
Okay.
because I remember in the first year I went to do software engineering. I scored 99 out of 100 on my I think my programming course, because a lot of this I taught myself as a 15, 16-year old.
Okay.
So university felt a bit repetitive because I already learned all this on my own. So the educational experience wasn't great, but the social and the
Hmm.
uh, and then the bonding experience was really, really important for me.